Welcome to the Righteous Savages podcast. Tonight we are going to be talking about a very important subject adjacent to a lot of the other subjects that we've talked about in regards to masculinity and just what it means to be a good, godly man. But we're going to approach this from a different aspect tonight and talk about young men. And we have a very special guest, Coach Kerry Martin, who's going to be joining us tonight discussing this, and we'll get into Kerry's background and his history here in a little bit, but I kind of wanted to start off, first off, by welcoming you. Welcome to the Righteous Savages podcast.
It is great to be here.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Honored to be asked.
Yep.
And excited to share with you guys tonight. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're excited.
Yep. Yeah. And as usual, I have my partner in crime, even though he's a cop, Mr. Dave Kemp over here. And we have a new studio set up, just to give everybody a heads up. It kind of looks a little familiar, but some things have flipped around. We did a lot of work on the studio this week, getting some things set up so that we can be more set up all the time to be able to do this content and
more
do
productive.
some live stream. More productive.
Yeah,
Workflow
like
upgrades, I guess you could say. So, so that's really cool. So let's dive into this subject, because I think that there's a lot to talk about and a lot to unpack tonight. So first off, I think it's not a surprise to anybody that the state of masculinity is kind of broken in the country. It's kind of broken in the church, and we're leaving a lot of young men kind of out there flapping in the wind, for lack of a better term. Yeah. So, Coach, kind of what do you see in culture currently in what's going on with young men?
Well, there's a lot of change from when I started as a teacher and a coach back in the mid-1980s. The difference is pretty dramatic. The family situation is far different than it was when I started, and that's had a detrimental effect. I could see it. I could see that happening slowly over time, but it certainly was having an impact on our young men. I think the definition of masculinity, I think that word itself has become toxic in the minds of some people. And I think the big issue for me is the pendulum swing in this country is pretty dramatic. And when there is an issue, and don't get me wrong, there can be issues with anything like masculinity or whatever, but it's the dramatic response to it to make all masculinity bad. Yeah. Also, all of a sudden, it becomes this negative word itself. Now the word masculinity is negative, where there can be parts of it that needed to be corrected or fixed or reevaluated. The whole word has become a negative term, and I think that's really sad for our young men to be told that that's a bad thing to be masculine.
Yeah, I think that really there's a couple of things going on. And do you feel like that one of the big contributing factors, you mentioned changes in the family structure, fatherlessness?
Absolutely.
Is that really, in my mind, probably one of the biggest contributing factors out there?
If I had to rank them, I can't think of something any more significant in the detrimental aspects of our society than that. We are suffering from not only fathers not present, but fathers that are present that haven't done a very good job, and I think there's a gaping hole there that we need to. We're not sure how to fill that, and it's a big concern. But you can see it, and I praise the Lord for those good dads out there that are fighting the good fight, and to those single moms that are doing their best to find a way to navigate this with their teenage boys, their teenage sons. But we have a situation where we're in crisis when it comes to fatherlessness in this country, and not just in the inner cities or big places, big states, but right here in Marion, we have that same issue.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that. So, Kerry, as a teacher for 30 some odd years,
yes,
we can sit here on this podcast and say a lot of things about, we think that, kids growing up without fathers is bad, and that's one of the reasons why we're having troubles in the country. And we can just sit here and talk about it because we've maybe heard somebody else talk about it, or it's a common talking point. But your perspective, working in school systems, you get to see every single day all of these students come into the school, and you get to see their behavior. You get to see how they perform in class, their grades. You get to see the kids that are getting in trouble or stirring up things. And you also know what their family situation is. So you have been somebody that's been collecting real, actual data, real information for decades.
Yes.
And that's the information that's real life. That's the truth. And so when we are talking about this stuff tonight and in the future, we always try to make it evidence-based. Like, our opinions are not just merely, we heard a guy say this thing, so we're going to repeat the talking points of the day.
Yeah.
You know, from whether it's my law enforcement experience or John's military or Coach Martin. And I think what you saw in the schools on a daily basis was evidence of what you're talking about.
100%. You know, there's no absolutes. Not every kid that was in trouble, not every kid that was suffering academically or behaviorally, was it because they didn't have a dad at home. But the percentage is pretty strong, and it was evident. And you know, we could, as a coaching staff, we evaluated these situations constantly. It was an everyday thing. Why is so-and-so in trouble? Why is his behavior not where it should be? Why is he giving this teacher trouble? Why is he having trouble getting to practice on time? Why is he not showing up? And most often we knew that was often a reflection of what was taking place in the home. And it just, you hate to say, man, but almost time after time you found out there was some issue in the home, some situation with parents, or just some crisis involved with the family that was reflected in their behavior, their conduct, their grades, their ability to focus in class. It was an issue, and it concerned me as I left the profession that it was trending the wrong way, and it was trending that way almost my entire career, and I'm been very concerned about it. So we had to make some attempts, and if you want to get into that later, we had to make some more concerted and intentional things in our program to try to help with that situation. Because when I first started, I feel like those situations were less common. But we had to address it as a coaching staff.
Yeah, it's so funny.
And
So I've got a few notes here. The very first question on my list was this. Of your decades of teaching and coaching, at what point did you start to see a need to where there was a lot more to your coaching than just teaching offense and defense, and that it was mentoring kids and taking care of kids and life skills? At what point in your career did you start to realize, man, we have to teach life skills and fix issues with these kids? Well,
I'll say this. I was blessed to grow up and have a couple of coaches at my high school that were doing that before it was something that everybody was doing. My father was a little league coach who didn't just coach baseball. He mentored young men's lives at a very young age, and I didn't appreciate it when it was happening because I didn't know any different. I had a high school coach named Kirby Phillips, who was a legendary track and cross country coach. He was coaching football at the time in Salem. I encountered him. He was transformative in teaching us more than the game of football, but how to be young men. My senior year, we had a new high school coach, and he came in as a head football coach my senior year. And if you look at our playbook, it wasn't just X's and O's and plays and schemes. It was life lessons and slogans and quotes and things that pertain to life as much as it did the game. So I say all that because I want you to know I came in with that in my mind, that's something I needed to do, as I know the impact it had on me and my teammates. So then when I got into coaching, when you're 25 and you take a job that nobody else wants, and you probably shouldn't have taken it yourself because it was a very difficult job, but I didn't know any better. So I took it, and I knew from the beginning I wanted to be that guy, but you're doing so many things. You hit the ground running. There's so many things to deal with. But it very quickly, to answer your question, I knew I had young men in crisis even that far back, and I had to do some things to help be more than just their football coach. I had to be there for them in other ways. And so, but the intentional side of it, really digging in and studying this, didn't take place till probably the mid-'90s when I came to Carterville as the head coach, and was addressing some issues on the team, and then I had some mentors come into my life through organizations like the Fellowship of Christian Athletes and some others that really opened my eyes to, hey, we need to be doing more and be more intentional. So I was doing it, but not with the intentional side that I've approached it later in my career.
Yeah, well, that is so interesting. I've got a lot of more questions on the coaching side and your personal story, and we're going to get into that in just a minute. So just like in schools, we see kids that are having problems, having issues, and we have to deal with the social side of kids and families and relationships. We also, seems like in this day and age, we have to deal with some social aspects of church as well. And as Christians, as people that profess our faith in Jesus, we're looking to the church for some type of mentorship as well. We're looking to them as an organization, as guidance, and to kind of set the guardrails for our faith a little bit. But it seems like a lot of churches out there don't really know where the lines are at. It's getting kind of grayed out a little bit. The lines aren't as clearly defined anymore, and I don't know. I kind of see that affecting. You don't just see typical Baptist church on Sunday morning on TV anymore. Yeah. You might see, there's 40 different variations of churches. There's 100 different variations of exactly what people believe in. And I'm curious, just from your perspective, if you see the same type of thing. We're lucky enough to go to a church. We go to Cornerstone in Marion, and we've got a pretty solid crew of pastors and counselors and people that are deeply involved. But there's a lot of churches that people we talk to that they don't have that. In America, it seems like a lot of places are kind of losing their direction a little bit. And I'm wondering if you see some of that as well. Do you see a trend in kind of church, and not really religion, but just, Christianity or pastors kind of not really defining guidelines and not being a mentor to men, especially perhaps?
Well, I think the bigger churches with the larger amount of resources are doing a pretty good job. It's the smaller churches that are fighting for resources and staff members that are struggling to have what they need to do this. The youth pastors and the counselors and people that could address these issues, they just don't have the people. A lot of these churches are fighting for their survival. And in doing so, I think they're concerned about making maybe things fun for kids, trying to get them in the door. I think all for good intentions, but I think it may not be so much a lack of they don't want to do it. Number one, I'm not sure some churches right now and some teachers and some schools know exactly how to deal with this situation and where to go with it, because there's so much fear of backlash if you overstate something or something you say gets misunderstood. As I said, if you start talking about teaching young men to be masculine, to some people, just that phrase can send up warning flares. What does that mean? They're thinking of some bullying thing and some overly, some football kid that's bullying or intimidating people. That's their view of masculinity. And I think the church is in a tough situation. I said the bigger churches in our country, seems like it's the smaller churches are dying out. The bigger churches are filling the void, and the bigger churches, I think, are doing a better job of it. Smaller churches just lack the resources, lack maybe the know-how, lack the ability to pinpoint that and directly address it because they just don't have the staff, the people, the things to do it. I couldn't judge them on their lack of not wanting to, but then I go back to what I said earlier. A lot of people just don't know how to address it and how to address it well. So maybe since they don't know how, they just don't. Yeah. Because I think they're afraid of getting themselves in a worse situation. So, so I do. I think Cornerstone does a great job in what they're doing, and I think other churches in our area, people I speak to, feel like churches I belong to in the area have done well. Yeah. But others, I think, are missing it.
I think a lot of churches out there, they're kind of in the touchy-feely, warm and fuzzy, we want everybody to feel good.
They do.
Business.
Sure.
That's a big part of it. But when I think of churches that are in the middle of a scandal or some crazy things going on, and you think, I wonder how we're going to turn this around, I always think, well, maybe if they modeled the organization and how the church is run like an extremely successful football team, man, that might be a good way to change things around. Because when I think of, name a successful football organization like Marion High School football or a professional football team where, all the coaches are hitting on the same cylinders. They all believe in the same thing. All their values are the same. They're putting the same message out, and there's no room for – it's like you're not allowed to be 1 minute late to practice. You're just not. And if you are, you're not playing on Sunday. Those hard and fast rules sometimes aren't in play in church organizations, and it leaves room for maybe we won't say anything about this person that's doing this, or we're not really afraid to say anything about hot button issues like abortion or something that let's just not do that. But to me, I'm sitting back on my couch thinking, man, it would be really cool if some of these places had a successful sporting team kind of style of management, because it works. And I think a lot of that is, people are accountable.
Yeah.
People have to follow, certain rules, certain guidelines, that type of thing. So
it's and you probably understand this better than we do as a coach. You have to have a set of standards.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a set of standards,
right.
And as far as the church goes, God sets the standard for us.
Amen.
And we just have to share that standard and uphold that standard.
Yeah.
And I think when you're talking about a successful football organization or any sports team, standards have to be set and met on a daily basis. And that may be the standard of if you're late to practice, you don't get to play in the game. Yeah. Even if you're the star player.
Right.
If you have bad grades, you're not going to play. Personally, I know my wife is a school teacher as well, and so she's had to have some of those hard conversations with athletes that she's been a teacher for hey, you're not meeting the standard, so you don't get to play. And if you have a strong, successful organization, they're going to uphold that, I think. So what's your experience with that as a football coach? And
yeah, well, there's no doubt there has to be hard and fast standards that are set, and not only set, but they have to be taught. And then they have to be reinforced. And then they have to be focused on, and I'm talking, we call it culture building now. That's the buzzword in coaching is culture. And it's something that became more intentional for me in the late 90s, but especially in the 2000s, where we built a pyramid of beliefs that we have in our program. We put those in the locker room. We test the kids on it. We take each of those pillars, beginning with attitude comes first, followed by discipline, followed by effort, and so right up the pyramid. I stole it from John Wooden, the great basketball coach who had a pyramid, and so we developed our own. And they were things that we believed were very important for our program's success on and off the field, and for the present and the future of our kids. Because we wanted everything on that pyramid to be able to be just as important in life as it was on the field, but so they could coexist. And then we would take those pillars and we would teach something every day from one of those. Give an example, a story, a video clip, a former player, something we saw in practice today that epitomized exactly what the principle of preparation or competition is all about. And I'm telling you, it isn't something you can just slap on the wall and forget about. You got to talk about it every single day. This is who we are. And at some point, you want to start hearing your players using your language. And when they start saying those things and they start talking about them, and when they're interviewed by the local media before a big game, and you can hear your words, the program's words being echoed, you're having that impact. But and it happened. It was a sense of great joy to start to hear what we put together as a program, to hear the kids repeating that. But yeah, I think that's the key. You got to have those standards. You got to have those virtues you believe are significant. Demand they be adhered to. Teach, correct. Just don't throw a kid out and say, I hope you're a good player, but develop what's inside that player first and foremost so you can get the most on the outside. So, yeah, and I think looking at what we're going to talk about today, that shortcomings of the church to me is the hardest thing for me to answer. Not from a coaching, teaching standpoint, I'm so comfortable, but because the church is in such a strange situation of trying to get people to come, but not wanting to do anything to offend, not wanting to do anything that gets taken the wrong way. So they're in this weird situation. We got to get kids here. We got to get parents here. but how do we do that? And then sometimes they do things that just attract, but don't follow maybe as closely to the standard as it should. And I think, and not saying I'm judging, as I know I've talked to pastors and they are in a strange place of how do I keep this church alive? And like you said, sometimes you just have to just trust in God and just do what you got to do, what the Bible says to do. And but as a coach, I had to kind of throw caution to the wind and say, I know my players are all about winning. They want to win. They're in this program to have fun and win games. But I've got an obligation to do way more than that, because teaching a kid how to run an out route is great. I mean, he can be great at it. But if he leaves here and that's all he can do, what a waste of time this has been. So coaching just became, from the day one, a platform to help young men grow into better men, better fathers, husbands, siblings, workers. And you want to win along the way? Heck yes. But we found that the two weren't, in contrast to one another. You build better young men. You teach them those standards. You adhere to them. You develop them. And you'll win more ball games.
Yeah. You're really spending a lot of time molding these young men. And, man, what a just research field you've got as a football coach to see what it takes to mold young men to where they need to be. And one thing I think is common with football, that's common with military, police, with anything in the team environment, SWAT team or special operations or whatever, is that a lot of what you do to help mold a team involves a lot of really, really hard things to do. And I'm curious what you think about that, whether it's the sprints, whether it's coming to practice at 5 a.m. in the summer, whether it's whatever, the hard things that you're requiring of these kids. What, does it benefit them? How does it benefit? Why is that type of thing important for these kids?
Great question. I'll try to make this not too long of an answer because it is a great question. So the first thing is not just demanding they do something, but why do we do it? We have to get the kids to see beyond the short term. Kids of all, male, female, young, old, they think short term. In the middle of the summer, when it's 98 degrees and a heat index of 110 on the turf, it's even hotter than that. How do I get a kid to know that what we're doing today matters week one, first week of September, last day in August? So you have to constantly talk about thinking longer than today. Surviving practice is not the goal. We got to thrive at practice. So why are we doing this? And I'll give you a quick example. We had to play a team from up north on the first Saturday of the season. We anticipated it being brutally hot on that turf. They wanted to play in the afternoon, and we're like, okay, we got about 4 months to get our kids ready. So we practiced at about game time all summer. And we told the kids, this is why we're doing it. We're going to win this ball game by attrition. We're going to wear them down. We were an up-tempo team, wear the defense down. We won that game on about the last play of the game. We threw a touchdown pass. And I think our kids got to see, the goal was get in shape, deal with the heat, deal with the adversity in the situation. It's going to pay off. Then we could use that story of that win over Rochelle for the next 5-6 years I coached as this is why we had to do that tough thing. Yeah. We had to practice at a time when some parents said, it's too hot to practice. No, we're playing at this time, August 26th. We've got to practice at that time. If nothing else, not only physically get our kids acclimated, but mentally. Yeah. We've practiced in this heat all summer. I think you've got to let kids know why you're doing the things you're doing. Why are we practicing now? Why are we doing the sprints? Why are we lifting the weights? You've got to sell that, and you've got to have those stories. You've got to have those testimonies from other players, maybe past players that can come in and talk to your team and say, I've been in your shoes and I've done it. Get those different voices. I think that to me was key in selling the hard part of the game. Yeah. And as I said, selling the why
I think it's important to do that up front. It used to be in military and police, that was not the case. Like, we're not telling you why we're doing this for maybe 10 years.
Yeah.
You are going to do this thing, boot camp, whatever. How come we got to run 20 miles? Because I said so.
Because I said
Get
so.
over it. It was like that. And maybe 8 years later, you would realize why you had to do it. And now, as far as our training especially for law enforcement guys, is we don't hold back. We tell people all the good stuff, everything, all the secrets, if you want to call it that, right up front. We don't make kids earn it anymore. Like, you got to be here, you got to be a cop for 5 years before we tell you the secrets of how to shoot or how to do these things. And I think it probably would benefit everybody, whether it's kids in football or police or law enforcement, to explain the why. Like, why are we doing this thing? So that people can buy in and not just be in a mystery about what's going on, or not really buy in to what's going on. But I think the good thing about the hard part is it builds resiliency. Kids all of a sudden can take things when other things in their life get hard. It's like, well, it's studying for a test isn't that hard. I just spent the last 8 Saturdays of my life doing sprints in the middle of the summer. And they learn resiliency.
Right.
I work with people that get offended just because they heard somebody else say something about them behind their back, and they're bawling their eyes out. Like, kids are not today in 2024, 25-year-old men are not very resilient. And because, maybe they didn't, play on a good football team. Maybe they didn't. So the team thing, doing hard things with people is a big deal. And it should be built into a lot of other things I think kids are doing, because we see it in law enforcement. John's seen it in military, that any type of team environment where people kind of have to suffer through hard stuff, all of a sudden you're in it together. Man, we made it through this hard thing together. And not only for yourself, but now you're proud of the people you're with. And it's there's so many benefits of having kids. Not that you want to be mean, but it's like you're just teaching them to hang in there. I remember from watching the movie that Jamie Foxx did about Ray Charles. And there's a scene in the movie where Ray Charles's mom is watching Ray as like a 7-year-old crawl around on the floor, and he's bawling his eyes out because he can't find anything. He doesn't know where mom is, and she's holding her mouth, tears streaming down her face, trying not to make a sound so that Ray has to figure out what to do on his own. That's hard. That is a hard life decision, to watch your kid suffer and just beg for mom and not show up and pick your kid up.
That's right.
But that's what made him become a great person, a musician. And so it's we definitely need more of that. So definitely going to get into some of your background and your history as far as your coaching and teaching history. One of the things I see in the news lately is where I don't know if it's a real trend, but we see all of a sudden the 10 Commandments are going to be put in school in Louisiana. Like, they got to put it everywhere on campus. In Oklahoma, they got to start teaching the Bible. And these trends are a little bit different than some of the other trends of, like, high schools getting sued because you're praying with your team on the football field
right.
after a game. So there's a lot of talk about team prayers and coaches praying with their team. And once again, from the real world perspective of being a parent and having kids in school and playing football, you see that is also part of the team building, bonding process. And I want to know your opinion on that, on coaches praying with kids in a huddle on the football field after a game, before a game, whatever, and kind of what that meant to you guys and how you use that to better your team.
Well, we did it. We made some adjustments at times. I had a couple of Jewish players for a period of time who simply came to me after practice one day and said, "Coach, I don't mind you praying afterwards. Can you make your prayer to God and not to Jesus?" And I said, "We can do that." When we did prayers in public, I would have some of my Christian leaders on the team would lead the prayer post-game instead of having a coach do it who's a public teacher. And that took pressure off my administration. And I actually thought it was better when the kids prayed anyway. So a lot of the post-practice prayers the coaches would do, unless a player wanted to do it. Yeah, like I said, I saw it as a platform. We weren't forcing our faith on anybody. We weren't, it was just the vast majority of my kids, I'm sure, over the years wanted to do it, enjoyed it, asked for it if we didn't do it, would remind you if you forgot. But we were sensitive to making sure that we weren't putting anyone in the administration in a bad place. I didn't want to do that and create a problem for them. But, you talked about the tough things, and we get these wristbands every year. This is from Coach Dunning, the new head coach at Marion. He continued the tradition of these wristbands, which has the team slogan for the year, the word or the phrase for the year. And one year, ironically, it was choose toughness. And I think people thought it was, physical toughness, but that's not really what it was about. It was to study or not to study before I go to bed. Studying's hard. That's choosing toughness. Mm-hmm. Getting to workouts on time, doing the right thing when there's no one around to watch, but just making those decisions that aren't always the easier decision, but they're the tougher decision. And I felt like we wanted the kids to understand that it is a choice you make. You are empowering yourself with the things that you decide to do. And I felt like the faith-based side of coaching, the challenges we're facing, and again, it's the pendulum swing. When someone starts demanding that we take all religion out of school, and then we start demanding, we allow this in school and we allow that in school. And there's a lot of confusion in the gender situation now for a lot of our kids in schools and how to handle it. Then the pendulum swings the other way and says, no, we're going to put the Ten Commandments back on the wall and we're going to study the Bible. That pendulum swings back and forth. And so it doesn't surprise me as a history teacher. I've taught this many times that socially and politically, that pendulum swings constantly. And so if you want to do something extreme and impart an extreme belief on anyone, expect the pendulum to swing extreme the other way. But somewhere in the middle lies some kind of compromise. I don't always love that word, but a lot of times if you want to have some kind of resolution, it's going to fall somewhere in the middle. But we tend to go one extreme to the other, and it pits a lot of people against each other in groups, and then we demonize each other, and then we got people screaming they're victims, and it's chaos, and that's where we're at.
Yeah. Have you ever? There's a really fascinating book. It's literally called Pendulum, and I would
need to read that.
It's a fascinating case study through history
I'd love to read
and
it.
It's specifically he looks at the generation changes and shifts, and he classifies them as us generations and me generations, and how they shift back and forth, and it's over a 40-year period.
Interesting.
And you see this shift, and he can actually track it all the way back to the founding of the United States, where you can see these different generations. And right now, spoiler alert, we're in a me generation.
Yeah.
And you can see that.
You can sense it. Yeah.
Wartime is probably us.
Yeah. Great Depression, greatest generation of era.
Yep. And so you see that. It's a fascinating book. I would highly recommend it. I've read it a couple of times. I actually don't. I think I actually loaned it out. Otherwise, I'd let you borrow it. But it's a fascinating book. Highly recommend, even to you guys out there. But that pendulum does swing back and forth, and it's like trying to adjust, because we see things. I mean, I personally see things in culture every day, and I'm on social media more than probably most, and you see this craziness in the world of just you mentioned it, the gender confusion and all of this stuff, and it's just like in your face so much. And it's me as a father, I'm thinking, how do I protect my kids from this craziness and this confusion? But you realize that the pushback has started, and it looks like it's coming back. But we have to be careful, because while we believe that Christ is King in heaven and on earth, we have to understand that we are living with other people that don't necessarily believe that.
That's right.
And our best bet is to let the gospel do the speaking and just present it to people that are willing to hear it, and let God do the rest of that work.
I appreciate that, because I think by hammering those on the wall, you may not be converting a lot of people in that manner, but you know what I mean. And we need to, not that I'm against it, but I don't know that that's going to solve the issue without mentorship and discipleship and proper messages. They took prayer out of school in 1962 in the Supreme Court case of Engel versus Vitale, and I used to tell my class, I'm all for kids being allowed to pray and having prayer groups in school and kids, whatever. I don't know if I want a non-believing teacher standing in front of the class just reciting some 15-word prayer and it's not coming from his heart. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's not that I'm against school prayer, but do I need every teacher who may or may not be a Christian leading that prayer, and does that really make any difference? You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So I'm somewhere kind of like you. I want to make sure that we are opening the gospel to people that are hearing it and hearing it the right way and are maybe open to saying, what is this about? And I want them to see the difference in us. Yeah. I want them curious about what we have, because the church grew in Rome by the conduct of the Christians, not what they said, but what they did. And that made the Romans say, we persecute them, we do this, we do all these things to them, and they're the most kind, loving, charitable, servant people. What do they have that we are lacking?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so interesting. So you've got, when you're coaching, you've got the pyramid on the wall with the motivational stuff, and you got the wristbands, and you got the T-shirts, and you got all this motivational stuff out there. But what do you, as a coach, do day to day to reinforce that, other than sitting down with a kid personally and saying, hey, this is why it's important to be tough? Like, just what are your actions? Like, what are some things you can do as a human being to model those beliefs? You can't go out and, as much as you'd want to, run a 80-yard go route and catch a pass and practice and tackle 12 kids, and you can't physically be the example coaching every day. It's not your job to do that anyway. Right. So as a coach, how do you model those values to kids?
Well, first of all, if you put them on the pyramid, you better live them yourself. I had to be aware that my conduct had to reflect that pyramid as well, and my attitude had to be good. And when it wasn't, I made sure I told my players I failed in that attribute today, or in that game last night, or whatever. I had to be very open and let them know when I missed the mark on some of those things. But we tried to find so many examples. As I said, we found historical examples, and you mentioned earlier about the extreme. We would find extreme examples of courage and extreme examples of heroism to make what we're doing. Well, then if that guy can do that in World War II, if those guys can fly on a B-17 with a 45% kill rate and still volunteer for another mission because they don't want to let their teammates down, I can go out and play Kankakee ranked number 1 in the quarterfinals with some courage, because those dudes, that's courage. You know what I mean? So we tried to do those kind of things. I want to say this too. All of this stuff, it falls short unless you build a relationship with that kid. And so we embarked on one-on-one interviews. I began meeting with my kids one-on-one. Full disclosure, I didn't do it every year. I did it towards the end on most years, but it was always a blessing. I wanted to get to the heart of the kids, something beyond football. And then we did a thing, and I brought it with me today, but we did a thing where we would have a breakout session and ask the kids to answer 4 questions on a piece of paper. Tell me your history, tell me who your heroes are, tell me your heartbreak, and tell me your hope. So what this did was allow me to know something about their history, where they're from, where parent situation, siblings. Tell me who your hero is. Tell me a heartbreak situation, something that made you sad, something that didn't work out, in your life. And then what is your hope? What do you hope for in life? And they weren't football guided questions, they were life guided questions, but it gave me a chance and my staff a chance to look and get a peek inside the heart. But it gave us a springboard to a relationship based on their answers. And that's just one quick example of a fast way to fast track our way. Because those attributes and us teaching them, if you don't have a relationship with the kids, and a relationship built on trust, and a relationship built on, I care about you as a person first and foremost, those attributes are hard to teach.
Yeah. That's such a cool story. In the last 14 years of my law enforcement career, I was a sergeant and then a lieutenant supervising an evening and midnight patrol division. So a patrol supervisor, Carbondale PD, supervising lots of street cops. And every year we have to do annual evaluations on patrol officers, on sergeants. And, the annual evaluation was one of those dreaded things usually between, the person evaluating and the person getting evaluated. And sometimes the feedback wasn't that great. And it was like, hey, we checked some boxes. Does this look good? They'd sign off on it. And about a year or so ago, you talked about that at Cornerstone at a presentation you gave. And I thought that's really cool. I mean, what a personal way to get some information out of somebody without being like, let's get personal, John. I really want to.
You do that with a guy. He's likely to punch you.
Yeah, let's hug and talk about your feelings. Yeah, if you say that, you're gonna get beat up. But those questions. So I did that. The very first evaluation I did with a second watch patrol officer, and told me about his history. Told me about his hopes. We got to heartache. He's crying within about 2 minutes, telling me very personal family tragedies type stuff. And we talked some more. And I'm telling you what, whenever you were talking about heartache and tragedy, and you've opened up to somebody, after that day, there's a different relationship between those two people.
Forever.
No doubt. 100%. Whether you're friends or not, it's just things are different. So anybody watching out there, and I wrote it on my notes before Kerry even got here, the very first thing on here is the 4 H's that I was going to talk to you about tonight.
Awesome.
Because it was such an impact to what I was able to do. And I didn't use that on everybody, but when I saw opportunities, like I think this is going to be one where we can make a difference or make an impact, no doubt about it. And so anybody watching tonight that's involved in mentoring at all, or teaching or coaching or training, or you're a supervisor or you're somebody's boss and you're looking for a way to kind of break the ice, that's so easy. Such an easy way to do it. And man, that had a big impact on me. So I appreciate you sharing that for sure. And it had an impact, on a lot of ways.
You said it. When I had a player then, beyond those moments of learning something about them and developing relationship, and that element of trust begins to grow, I felt they were less likely to violate a team rule because they knew we were invested in them. And I also felt like when there was a violation, I had a perspective of where they were coming from that maybe I didn't know before. And when I found out some of the home situations they were in that I didn't previously know, it gave me a little patience. It gave me a little chance to not jump very quickly to some disciplinary saying, hey, wait, is something going on at home, and can we be of help to you somehow? And I got to tell you, I had great coaches that were bought into all this, and they were very supportive of getting to know the same situations with kids. So I appreciate you sharing that because, like any good coach, I stole that from somebody else, but I used it, and it meant a lot to me, and I know I shared it at Cornerstone that day, and it's good to hear someone took that and used it because it had a big impact on me as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I tell people in our firearms classes, everything you're going to hear today, 95% of it is just something from somebody else that we're sharing, and maybe 5% is something I figured out on my own, and I'm gonna give that done. I'll try and take credit for that too, but it's all just transferring knowledge from one person to the next. And I thought so as we kind of get into your background a little bit with your coaching and history. You coached for a lot of years. My dad was a high school teacher and coach at Carterville High School for 32 years. Yeah. And I never really grew up thinking, well, I'm going to be a teacher. But it turns out I'm kind of doing the same thing. Yeah. I'm doing, you can call firearms training, but it's really teaching people stuff. Yeah. And I notice as I look at kind of how my style of teaching is, I think it's pretty similar to him. I get into things, I'm touching people. It's like, my dad was the kind of guy that would just whistle and write stuff all over the place. And it was like Tasmanian devil style of teaching. I'm curious, your dad was a Little League, a baseball coach for years. Yep. Do you see similarities now looking back between how he coached and you did, or was it totally different? Did you go the opposite direction, or how did your dad's coaching, if at all, affect your coaching style?
I taught with Ray Kemp for 8 years, and it was a blessing. I told you stories before we went on camera that he was an amazing guy and a great teacher, beloved by the students, beloved by the faculty. So
that's awesome. I appreciate
special
that.
Man, absolutely.
Thank you.
And gave some great golf tips to me. So, it's funny because I didn't realize just how good my dad was. I knew he was good. He won a lot of city championships and had a lot of impact on kids. I knew that. But I sat down to write my own story. I'm writing my own story in a book, and I've been pecking away at it for about 6 or 7 months, and just a little bit here and there. And the part I wrote about my father was really, the more I wrote about him, the more what he did came to light for me, and a greater appreciation. I don't know why it took me to write about it, to really start digging in deep into how good he was. So I hope in many ways some of those traits that I talked about in the book, I carried on. I think I did. My dad was a great evaluator of talent. He cared about the person first, and he cared about the player second. I think my dad knew how to build a relationship with a kid, but he was also very tough about adhering to the standards, about being on time, about doing the things. And, you didn't miss your cutoff man with Jess Martin. You just didn't miss him, unless you wanted to have a seat next to him. So, but he did it in a way that it wasn't a yelling, screaming, ranting, and raving kind of guy. And when I think back to my teammates watching my dad coach, they didn't want to let him down. I think there's a gift to that you can impart on your kids without yelling and screaming at them, that they're invested in you as much as you are in them. And he had a knack for that, and God gifted him for that. It's funny you mentioned a book you read. I read a book a few months ago called Trust and Inspire, and the book is about a new form of leadership, about trusting the people around you and using that trust and building that relationship, and then letting them not only let that be an inspiration to them to be creative and work. But the part I most resonated with was the old form of leadership was command and control. Do it because I said so. And you mentioned that earlier. Why are we doing this? Shut up and do it. And I grew up in that with some coaches that were like that. When I first got into coaching in high school football, that was very much the macho way to coach. Grab a face mask, yell and scream. Some of it was for show, bravado, And man, I'm glad we got away from that, because I think we thought that was toughness, and it really wasn't. You can still teach the game of football the way my father taught baseball. You can be straightforward, hard-nosed, but you don't have to do all of that to get it done. You got to build that relationship. My dad would not have used the word culture. My dad probably wouldn't have sat a kid down and done the 4-H's back in the 1970s when he was coaching, but he was doing it in his own way.
Yeah.
And I remember my father won all kinds of awards with State Farm. I mean, they were all over his wall, to the point where he had to take some down and put some new ones up. He was a very successful insurance agent. And I'll never forget, I cleaned his office when I was in high school. That was my job. And I remember in his window sat a ceramic ball glove. And that thing never left that window of his office. And it came from a Little League player. It was a thank you. My dad didn't get a lot of thank yous from Little League players back in those days, but he cherished that, because a kid, when he was done, said, "You made a difference in my life." And my dad didn't talk about how much it meant to him, but I knew every time I saw it, that little ball glove, etched a little saying to my dad, meant a lot to him. So, to answer your question, I do think I hope I've carried some of those attributes along my coaching career.
Yeah. So, in your past, and we'll get more into the details of your story of, you're from Southern Illinois.
I am. Salem.
And so you kind of grew up in the, I guess you could say, the culture of Southern Illinois. We're very much a rural area, very much farmlands and that kind of thing. So anybody that out there from different parts of the world or different parts of the country, you understand that when we talk about Southern Illinois, we're not talking about Chicago. We're talking about, really, it's more like Missouri, Kansas, all kind of wrapped into one thing, So a lot of cornfields in the middle of the state, and then a lot of beautiful country down here in the South.
Yep.
But how did you choose? What's your backstory of how you came to become a coach? What was the inspiration that led you to that?
It's funny, because I was motivated. I loved sports. Had a couple of great, impactful coaches. But it's funny, when I went into college, it was not my first choice to teach and coach. And I to this day, I couldn't tell you why. And as I'm writing my book, I'm asking myself in the book, like, how did I not know? But I kind of wandered. I wasn't a good community college student. They called it junior college back then. But community college student. Went to SIU, still not sure what I was going to do. And at some point in my second semester at Southern, I would be about my junior year, man, I just decided I was going to teach and coach. And it's like a light came on, the path was lit up, and everything from that moment made sense to me. So I'll be honest with you. I feel like there's a little bit of divine intervention in that, that I needed a nudge. I think the good Lord said, "Look, you're not very good at very, very many things, but I do think you could be good at this." So, and I think I went on the path that I absolutely grew to love what I did. Every moment I did it. I'm telling you the truth. I don't know. I got students that may think I'm a good teacher, maybe some that don't, but I felt I was doing what I was meant to do every day I was in the classroom.
That's really cool.
I didn't care if it's had a snow day or not. I wouldn't mind going to work. I didn't mind when school started. I didn't mind if we had a break. That's great, but if we don't, I'm okay. I'm still teaching night school at Marion High School. I'm still teaching summer school at Marion High School. I still love to teach. I do miss the teaching. Coaching is a roller coaster, right? Teaching was good about every day, and I loved it. Loved my male students, my female students, the relationships in the classroom. So, I once I found that lane, it felt great.
It's just like you know, and so there's a lot of people out there right now, maybe young guys in college, and what are you going to do? And when you sit there in high school and think, what am I going to do with my life? That's a tough question. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'll be a farmer like my dad, or I just don't know.
I know.
So you just keep trucking along. At some point, you're going to fit. It's almost the same way for me. Gone to college, went to John A. for a couple of years. I don't know what I'm going to do. So I guess I'm done with John A. Logan. So I'm going to go to SIU. For what? I don't know. I'll start going to SIU for something. And in the summer of between sophomore and junior year of college, a company came to SIU called the Southwestern Book Company. And they sold encyclopedias and kids' books. And they're like, hey, here's an opportunity. You can go sell books door to door, and you might make $10,000 this summer selling books. And I was like, $10,000.
$10,000?
Sign me up. So I got signed up. It got bamboozled. We went to Nashville for a week for this training. And then they're like, okay, you're going to go to Eugene, Oregon and sell books. And you have to get there. You have to drive yourself, and you have to figure out where to live. And we knocked door to door, about a dozen of us, SIU students, and said, hey, we're college students from Carbondale, Illinois. Can we live with you for free for the summer? And some lady was like, yeah, we'll let a couple of you guys. So we lived in a furnished basement, me and a guy named Bobby. And we're like, hey, all right, we'll go sell books. It was horrible. It was the worst experience of my life. I sold
you
books
didn't make $10,000?
No, I made like $10.
Yeah.
Well, while I was out there, I decided, out of the blue, I'm going to do a ride-along with the Eugene Police Department. Over. I knew. Yeah. I fell into that. The round peg finally fit the round hole, and like, man, this is something else. And it was, nothing lights out after that. And it was just kind of weird how you might not know, but when you see it and feel it, you just know.
When I was 5 years old, I wrote in the classroom kindergarten "What I Want to Be" book that I wanted to be a police officer, and that's all I wanted to do till I was 18. Hill Street Blues. Watched it every week. Man, I wanted to be those guys. I did. I thought that's where I was headed. And for some reason, when I went on to Southern, that just kind of just went away. And I to this day, I couldn't tell you why, but maybe the Lord had a different plan for me. But yeah, I thought that may be where I was going. Yeah. I really wanted to do that.
I still can't figure out what I want to be when I grow up.
We're kind of figuring it out right now.
I would say that probably the biggest epiphany for me in the last couple of years of just realizing that there's a void and somebody needs to speak out about these issues with men. I think that, military and all of that stuff kind of everything led me here. And I was working with our youth at Cornerstone I worked there with our youth program for 6 years. I did all the music and saw a lot of kids, and I kind of understand the idea of teaching and coaching from that experience because you see kids come in, and I was mainly junior high and high school, and I saw kids go through their entire, all 6 years and then come out the other side, and it's really interesting because I still have a relationship with a lot of those kids that will, they still in a way look up to me and talk to me about things and will, text me from time to time. And it's a really cool relationship that you can build just by trying to impact and trying to be intentional about the way that you approach these kids. And so that led me into this kind of man world of, hey, we need men to be that example that I feel like you have been, and I know Dave has been, and start to bring these young men up, because if we don't, the world's going to just beat them up. Yeah. And it's going to be, you're going to see a lot more tragedy and a lot more pain, both in culture and the church and families. And I think that's really where it starts. Yeah. Is we got to start with our families, of being strong. Yeah. So you get out of college, and then you end up at Carterville, right?
I start off in a town called Sparta.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. A job that the football program was one of the worst in the state. Only job I could find. So I took it. I got
welcome to Sparta.
Welcome to Sparta. Yeah, I coached.
We got a shooting complex up
there.
They
do. They didn't have it then, but I met great people there. Loved it there, but a rough place to coach.
Yep.
And coached there for 3 years as an assistant. The head coach left. Nobody wanted the job. The school was bad. We had won 5 games in 3 years, and that was good compared to the previous years, which we weren't winning any games. And I was asked in the cafeteria if I wanted to be the head football coach, because basically I was on staff, and I just said, yeah, I guess so. Sure, that was my interview. So I said, sure, I'll do it. Went home, told my wife I'm the new head football coach, and she goes, oh, really? It's something we should have probably talked about. So, but
what's this pay? Like an extra $200 a year?
And this is the same head coaching job that I called my head coach from high school and mentioned that I was going to be the coach at Sparta, and he said, you'll die there. So thanks, but I didn't. And I was actually, after a year of head coaching there, we had a successful year. We tied for the conference. We made the playoffs. It was a big deal because I didn't know what I was doing yet, but I had great kids. And I'm still in touch with some of those kids to this day. It was a great senior class of kids that I coached as sophomores. We believed in each other, and they carried me through that first year. I got let go because of reduction in force, money issues in Sparta. Landed in Flora, Illinois for 3 years, and had 3 great years there. The Carterville job opened, and I decided just the Lord was leading me to apply for that job. A lot of people were recommending that job to me, and we made the move to go to Carterville, spent 8 years there.
Yep, and you won a state championship
we
there.
did in 1996. Yep. We sure did.
Yep, that's very cool. And then you moved on to Marion.
I did in 2002. Yep. I took the Marion job, another school that did not have a great history of football. So I think I saw it as a challenge, one more opportunity to do something different. Leaving Carterville was extremely difficult. I loved it there. I had a lot of success there. Great kids, great teachers, it's like Ray and it was tough to leave. And a lot of people thought I'd lost my mind a second time by taking that job in Marion. But I saw the potential in Marion. I believe that somebody's going to win here. Somebody can win here. Mike Root had done it in the 80s. And I said, I think someone can turn this around. And after the first 3 years, we had won 8 games total. And doubts about myself, doubts about what I'm doing, the decision. So I tried a 4th year. I kind of fired myself in the mirror and said, I'm starting over. And we went on a pretty good run after that. So,
yep.
But I think the adversity, which we preach to our players, adversity is opportunity. And when something bad happens, you have to immediately assess why it happened and where can we go from here, because this is a chance for betterment. And I had to live that principle out after 3 seasons. I had to say, okay, we've not been winning. So I changed everything. And that was tough to do because I had been successful other places. But I had to start over and say, we're going to practice different. We're going to run a different offense. Everything's different. And for some reason, those changes clicked with the Marion kids, and everything just...
You got out of your comfort zone.
I did. Yeah, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I thought I could take what I've done 3 previous schools, do it in Marion, it'll work, and it didn't. So I had to really do some reevaluation. But I think that adversity was an opportunity for me to be a better coach, and I grew probably more in that span of time that I had ever grown in my life as a coach.
We have a saying, Righteous Savages, that we coined, and we have it on one of our shirts. It's comfort is your enemy.
Yeah.
And I think that what you just talked about of adversity leaning into that discomfort,
Yeah.
leaning into,
Yes.
hey, I'm not sure this is going to work, but we're going to go for it.
We're going.
And I think that's really what's missing in culture and really with a lot of our young men is like we as a culture and society across the nation, we're addicted to comfort. We have so many comforts.
Yeah, Michael talked about that one day about one of our enemies was the enemy of comfort, and we are obsessed with it. You're right.
Yep.
And think about any great thing achieved by men in the Bible, led by God to do great things. Not a single one involved the word comfort. Whether you're building an ark or you're fighting a giant, or whether no matter what, you're a disciple of Jesus, there is discomfort. But that's where the great things of God happen, and they happen in uncomfortable situations.
Really hard stuff.
Really hard stuff.
Yep.
I was always curious. So, since my brother-in-law Nate was helping out with Marion football, we started going to a lot of Marion football games. So, growing up in Carterville, I don't know if I ever went to a Marion football game ever in my entire life. Just never did. I'm curious how much involvement you had in like the whole fan experience, because Marion football games are awesome. They are a good time. It is like college football atmosphere. It is not just watching high school kids. It's like, man, this is entertainment. And I don't know if you were just focused on like, hey, I'm going to coach, somebody else deal with this, or kind of how that all grew. But like, how did that develop? Like getting all that extra stuff involved to the experience.
Yeah. The goal from day one was make it the place to be on a Friday night. From day one. The crowds weren't very good. And many of the people left at halftime because the band was done. And so we wanted to make it the place on Friday. And it wasn't just me. It was Mike Shornack. It was some Laura Sanders with the dance team. It was the band director. Chuck Williamson and other band directors. But it was a collective effort to put on a show. And so I had my football part of it, but I also had some things about the introduction and how we took the field. But it was a collective effort of a lot of people. And our fans, once we started winning, really embraced the team. It became, we get so many, even just recently, going back to an all-star game in Southern Illinois, other coaches talking about the atmosphere at a Marion game is really, really special.
Yeah, it's awesome. You guys really
knocked
that out of the park for sure.
Yep.
One of the things with us, with Righteous Savages, that what we're trying to do is, we're trying to motivate and get people excited about their faith, about being able to speak out. I know for me personally, I've been a Christian since I was in high school. And through my career in law enforcement, I wasn't really outspoken about it at all. I tried to live a good life. I wasn't, going to parties with a bunch of cops, and I wasn't living a lifestyle that made me look like I wasn't, but I also never really spoke up a lot. Even when conversations would come up about God or religion, it was like, I was the quiet guy. I regret it. A lot, and I wish I would have been more vocal. A lot of people have a hard time figuring out, like in their job or whatever, like how do you be vocal without sounding like the preacher that's telling everybody how to live or whatever. And I've got a good friend of mine, and you'll probably know who this is here in just a second, who had you in high school and said one of the most just dynamic moments of his entire life was in a class with Kerry Martin one day, and you asked everybody in class, if there's anybody you could go back in time and interview, who would it be? And everybody said their thing, whatever, and the student told me that you said at the end of it, you would go back and interview Jesus.
Amen. No doubt.
And so everybody's sitting there, and you gave your explanation, but it wasn't like, okay, everybody, today we're going to talk about Jesus, and as a Christian, here's how you need to live and all this. But you brought it up in a way, and it was made a huge impact on that person to this day, who told me that story today when I told him I was going to come and talk to you about it. And so, those are the practical things, so I'm curious, like, what's your advice to people who want to speak up, who we don't want to be afraid to speak out, but what's your mindset of, I don't know if witnessing is the right phrase or not, but being a witness for your faith? What is a good way to project that without being, acting too churchy, too religious?
Yeah. It is a tightrope, but I don't want it to be. I don't want it to be. I want to be open. I want to be honest. I want to be bold, but I don't want to be pushy. I don't want to be offensive. I don't want to scare someone away and think I'm a Bible thumper. So it is a fine line, and how do I tread that? So I've always felt like I had to seize opportunities. That was an opportunity I had to seize. It was a chance to be honest about who I was. An honest answer, but there is no one even close. Lincoln is somewhere down pretty close as a history guy. I got a lot of questions for him. But Teddy Roosevelt's another one. But no one's close, because this is the most impactful human being that ever lived. Whether you believe in him or not, I got a lot of questions. And so it wasn't even close for me, because he's the most transformative figure. And so that was an opportunity. I had an opportunity to be an FCA huddle leader. Roger Leip was the area director, and being an FCA huddle leader, I had a chance to speak in front of numerous groups of kids and be open about my faith. There were opportunities on the field at times to let kids know where I've been and what I've been doing, and bring up the fact that, hey, our church is doing this, we'd love to have you, and just letting them know that this guy you see is not defined by this game. There's something more to me than that. And I had to find opportunities. I know that when we were making a run for the championship, I had to lean on the Lord very closely. I was 32 years old. We were expected to be very, very good. Nate was a junior that year, and the pressure to win was on us. We could, if we went 11-1, it would have been a failed season. We had to go far, and I felt that. And I was dealing with some anxiety about it, and I remember leaning on the Lord more than I ever had in my career, and praying. And so in an interview, I brought up something about God in my interview. And I said, they'll never put that in the paper. The Southern will never print that. And sometimes when they do a story and they blow up a quote in bolder letters,
off to the side,
they put my mention of God in the bolder letters on the side. Now, I was like, that is awesome, right? So, Mark Chastain put I Love Jesus on the back of his helmet before our championship game, which was televised, in all over Illinois. And he said, can I put this on my helmet? I'm thinking, I don't care, wear it. And we've had stories of people who saw that, and it changed their life. This kid wearing this sticker on the back of his helmet in the championship game. He had the Lions here, but he had I Love Jesus on the back. And you can only read it a couple times, but just opportunities. I mean, I think we all get them.
Tim Tebow must have seen that and thought, I want to be like Mark Chastain.
John 3:16.
So, I think that to me was the key. I think about Peter and having those opportunities and that denial that he had 3 times, no judgment, because that was a tough situation. I don't know what I would have done, but just, I don't want to be in a situation where I have to face the Lord and hear, hey, you had a chance to bring this up, to say this, and you missed it. And somebody I wanted to hear it was there to hear it, and we didn't, So without being too preachy, opportunities, and not letting those slip away. And I had to be, sometimes I created some situations to have an opportunity, but sometimes they just naturally came about.
I think God will open the heart of people and present that to you. And it will never end up being, I'm going to just go cold walk up to this person and start a conversation, and they don't want to have it. I don't think those are where most of those opportunities are. They're mostly like when they come to you and be like, hey, where do you go to church? Door's wide open now. Door's wide open. And those are the things you got to seize on with people and look for those opportunities for sure.
Yeah. So in moving into kind of like we like to give some practical, what we call them marching orders, or just practical things that we can do. So if there are men out there watching this podcast and or listening to it that are like, I want to do what these guys have done. I want to actually be able to mentor somebody. Yeah. What, in your experience, and I know Dave will have some things to say about this too, is like, what is a practical place to start, especially when we're talking about in the framing of a young man, maybe that late teens, early 20s guy that's still trying to figure this life thing out, or what do I do? How do I navigate this world that's kind of really anti-man, good masculinity, and how do people, older guys that may want to bring one of those guys under their wing, how do they approach that? Where do you go?
I love this. It's what, so what, now what. I love the fact that you're not just what, so what, because now what is crucial. What are we going to do with it? I think there are opportunities. You did it right there in your own church. You worked with the youth. Look, there is some of the fact that some young men don't know how to be young men comes from the fact they don't have good role models. And we know that. I mean, they're either their father's not there or he's not a good role model, and they need to see good role models. So we've got to get out in front of them. Whether it's coaching a youth team, the moment you put the whistle on, whether it's t-ball or whether it's soccer or football, you have a platform that is magnified. Fair, unfair, it just is. Working in the church, great platform. Volunteering with a men's organization. We do a breakfast once a month at the up at the vault, second floor above the vault. Iron sharpens iron, and there are some young men that come in there and they're wondering what's going on, and someone's invited them, and other men give testimony, and it's just all men in this room. And some of those Saturday mornings have been powerful. Another opportunity. So I think just looking for ways to get yourself in front of kids, whatever that may be. It doesn't have to be coaching, doesn't have to be in the church, but there are organizations and opportunities to get yourself out there in front of kids and in front of young men, where they can see good examples of role models. That to me is the key, and we've got to get on. Some of that's going to be uncomfortable to say, I don't know a lot about that sport, but just join the staff and be a guy that talks to the kids, just as an encourager. Yeah. But you know what I'm saying? You don't have to be an expert in the sport. I had guys on my staff that volunteered that didn't do a lot of X's and O coaching, but man, they mentored kids every single day. If a kid had a bad day, maybe coach yelled at him a little bit. They were the guy that had their arm around him on the sideline and was picking him up, saying, hey, he's talking to the player, not the person. You'll be okay, So I needed those guys too. Does that answer? I think those are things I'm thinking of when I think about the opportunities I see men having, the impact I see men having. Right now, the FCA huddles in our area are doing some great things with high school kids where they're able to really talk about their faith and really express it, and it's being cheered for. And they're talking about the standards of God and the biblical principles, and they're putting up good examples in front of them. You mentioned like Tim Tebow and others that were tough as nails, but men of God. Yep. And we've got to put those people, take kids, get a group of boys and take them to a godly movie and where there's a godly message. Those are opportunities that are now more prevalent than ever before. A Bible study where you could start a Bible study in your church, or find a youth pastor and say, hey, you need any help with a Bible study? Maybe on a Wednesday night, get some young men involved. We've got a guy in Carterville that was doing that for a while, and all of a sudden his basement was full of kids. He started with 5 kids, and then kids and kids and kids, and that multiplied into about 20 times. So I came to speak one night, and I'm like, wow, like this is impressive. But his intention was not to reach that many kids, but there's a hunger for it.
Yeah.
There is.
I think that's the biggest thing, is that like when you see these things start to explode and start to really snowball, or whatever metaphor you want to use, you realize, wow, there is a desire for it. I think of a guy just kind of in the YouTube sphere, that came out a couple of years ago, Jordan Peterson. Yeah. And he's talking about, if you've ever read his 12 Rules for Life, it's like some of this stuff is like straight biblical. Yeah. These principles that he's talking about. And young men were eating this up. Yeah. He became a massive, massive star. I don't even think he wanted to become a star, but he became a massive public figure because he was just giving practical advice. So like, hey, get up and make your bed. Do the things that nobody else sees.
That's right.
These are principles that you can live by, and you're going to be a better person. And the hunger for that, I don't think it's gone away. I think it's just as strong, or if not stronger, because there's an all-out assault on those principles from culture and just media and all of this stuff. And I think that, as men, we should be looking for those opportunities, even if it's just one. It doesn't have to be a group, just one.
It only takes one.
Yeah.
I heard a story a few years ago about a public school teacher in Miami, Florida, and he found one of those 1950s, 1960s. It was a film, I think. He actually found a projector and had this film and thought it'd be funny to show his kids because it was teaching about manners. Now, this would be hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
The kids will love it. He had a lot of different kids in his room from all different backgrounds and races, and he thought that the kids will love this. And he said, I turned it on, I played it, and the room was silent. He thought they would laugh. They didn't laugh. And some of them said, I didn't know any of that stuff. Like, they were actually curious about opening doors, and it was corny, but he goes, it was not the effect. And I thought, and he said, there's a hunger to know those things, and we assume they won't like them.
Yeah, it's like there's a hole in their soul that's waiting to be filled with that.
That's right.
That stuff.
Because we're godly created, and we can be so we're putting a lot of things in there, and they're not fulfilling, and they're short term. They might feel good for a while. Mm-hmm. Don't trust your feelings, right? Feelings are not always right. So, but once they get you offer them a taste of those godly principles. They're godly created, so there's a fit to it. And I think, and why I said manners, but I think they were just things that men should do. It was primarily geared towards young men, I think, and that's why he thought these young men would think it was funny.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
So speaking of movies, have you seen the movie produced by Micro, Something to Stand For? Have you heard about this movie?
I've heard about it, but I haven't seen it.
Go see this movie. It's only going to be out like over 4th of July weekend or whatever. Go see this movie. So I'm not going to give anything away about it, but it basically Micro narrates about 6 or 7 different stories from history, like from the founding of our country. People involved in the beginning of America, and it's like the style is like Paul Harvey. Rest of the story. So it starts off. He's telling you how the story goes without any of the names or who it's involved, and you're trying to figure out what's this going to be about. What's this about? So you're getting a backstory of how the thing came to be, and at the very end, he drops the bomb of the name of who this person was. You're like, what? It's amazing. It's awesome. Amazing to see, and it's all historical accounts of different parts of how and when America was being founded, and Revolutionary War, and about all kinds of cool stuff. It is such a patriotic thing. I think students in schools these days are missing being connected with, like, what's this country all about? Like, morals and values. Like, man, we need people that have stood for something and died for something, and that's what's important, not whether somebody flies a certain colored flag at a school or above some government building. It's like we've got to get back to what's really important. What's really important. And man, just if you haven't seen this movie, or if it's too late and it's not out anymore, at some point find a way to go take your loved ones and go see Something to Stand For. Really cool.
Yeah, I think that's really what we've been talking about, is like whether it's a standard to stand for or a faith to stand for. Everybody needs a what's the word I'm looking for? A purpose. That's the big P word, purpose. Everybody is in need of a purpose, and I think that really finding your purpose is something that I think that's probably what's missing from a lot of young men right now, is they don't feel like they have a purpose. Yeah,
there's a thing out there now that's know your why, and it's the same thing. It's your purpose, and you said it well, and I had to remind myself when I was at my best as a coach and as a teacher, I kept the why I was doing it ahead of the what I was doing. Because the why you do it, you never burn out. You're always motivated. The bigger picture's always in play. When it's about the what I'm doing, the plays I'm calling, the practice schedule, you do that enough, you do that long enough, you start to get burnt out, you start to lose your focus, you start to get derailed a bit, yelling and screaming, losing focus, not following keep the why, keep the purpose. Once you find what that purpose is and you can hone in on it, man, that is powerful.
Yep.
Yeah, and not only will it keep you from getting burned out, but your level of performance increases 10x above what it was before. Because now it's like, you're doing something like you mean it, and not just I'm just doing this thing. You're really putting all your effort into it and getting much better performance. Yep. I'm curious, something you talked about earlier about wanting to be a police officer when you were a kid.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if Kerry Martin could wave a magic wand and put himself in some other career besides coaching, or is there any other thing in your life that you thought, I might have been really good at that? Like when I'm sitting at home on a weekend watching TV, I'm like, I think I could have been a NASCAR driver. I'm good at driving cars really fast, or maybe that golf thing looks pretty cool. I bet if I would have just dug in for 5 years, I could have. Is there anything that you look back and think, you know what, I might have been really good at something else, or was coaching and teaching just override everything?
Yeah. I go back to law enforcement. I still had, I have distant relatives that were Joplin, Missouri, police chief, and that's in my family a bit. My son-in-law is involved in law enforcement, but that was a desire of mine, and pretty firm in that for most of my school days growing up. But I've never really spent a lot of time looking at anything else thinking, man, I could have done that or should have done that. I'm really into writing my book, and I think nobody may read the book, so I have to come back and say I'm not meant to be a reader. But I've really enjoyed the writing of it, and I don't know, I think writing a book is interesting because I've had a lot of friends who've written books who've told me some things to look out for. One of them was the emotional roller coaster you'll ride writing the book, and I had it with my father and a classmate of mine that passed away. I had to relive some of those memories to write about him. But he said, then you got to figure out where does this book going to fit? Is this a coaching book? Is it a football book? Is it a faith book? Because once you write the book, it's got to fit somewhere. You've got to advertise it as so. And I still don't know that yet. But I want it to be something about my relationship with God and my journey of coaching that has to be part of it. Or I think then I'm to the point where who cares? Reading a book right now, and it's talking about what we do. We need to think not only long term, but think generational. And is what we're doing right now going to affect beyond our lifetime? And so many of these people, these historical figures from Lincoln and others, were thinking in terms of generational.
Yep.
I think that's important.
Yep. So that's awesome. Since you are some way, shape, or form related to some former professional baseball players, did you ever want to be a professional, just like St. Louis Cardinal baseball player?
I did. When I was growing up, I thought baseball was the thing I would do. My first love was baseball. So I I liked football. I never played much until they didn't have a lot of youth football back then. It wasn't until that coach came into my life my sophomore year where football became number one, and baseball began to fade. But baseball was my first love. I played with my dad. I played for my older brother as a coach, and I loved it. I was good at it. I broke my hand in football my junior year. My swing was never the same again. So I leaned into football pretty hard, and then I had the most success I had ever had. And then, so that's where I leaned. But
the rest is history.
Awesome.
My playing career was not great. I think I get better every year back in Salem, better than I actually was. So, but it's one of those things. I played on a good team, and I get more credit than I deserve on that team. But that coach that senior year and that experience, I saw how he transformed my life, my teammates, my school, and my community. And maybe I didn't know it at the time, but that's what got into that was a seed he planted that I wanted to do that in the towns I coached at someday.
Yeah. Well, just like your dad had that ceramic glove on the window in his office, and how much that meant to him, I can definitely tell you from the people I know, you've had a big impact on a lot of lives in a great way. So I just want to pass that on to you. I'm sure you've heard that before, and you're a very humble person, but I want you to know to keep doing what you're doing even beyond today, because I think just like teaching and coaching, what you're continuing to do today is impacting people in a great way, and your motivation to everybody that's watching. like John said, if you're looking for a way to do this, to really get involved in your own personal life, to raise the standard of your own life, or look for a way to be an example and a mentor to other people, to kids, follow the model of Kerry Martin, no doubt about it. And so definitely want to pass that along. Appreciate that. I've got, we could talk for another hour and a half.
Well, with that in mind, I think we'll have you back when you finish your book.
Yeah,
and we'll promote that for you, because
man, I appreciate that.
we really love the example that you've given for young men, and you've touched so many lives throughout the years that we all know somebody personally. Yeah. My wife was in high school when you were at your last few years at Carterville, so she knew you well when I said you were coming in. Yeah. So, but we're gonna sign off. I think we're gonna leave it at that. But don't forget to get involved in these young lives that are so in need to be molded in the model of Jesus, in the model of just learning good principles to live by. And so we definitely want all of you out there that are interested to get involved, because it's a needed thing, and it's very, very important for, just us to go on and have a good culture and society for the future generations. So we're going to sign off. Don't forget to follow us on social media, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. We're on all of them, X or Twitter. I still can't get used to calling it X. But, don't forget to do that. One of the best ways you guys can support us is to like and share our content, or buy some of our merch on our website. We have some really awesome shirts and hats. We have coffee. Me and the coach have been sipping on it all night. Yes, so it's good coffee. You will not be disappointed if you purchase some of it. Don't forget to check out our training. We've got a lot of training coming up. We've got a Warrior Weekend coming up at the end of September. We'd love to see some of you guys sign up for that, because that's a great opportunity to get some training, but also get some of our beliefs intertwined into it. It's a great opportunity. So we're going to leave you with our slogan that we have coined. Remember to take Jesus with you wherever you go and act like you believe. We'll see you guys soon.